I didn't really know about God growing up or anything like that. He was never the foundation of any of the decisions that I made or the people around me. So 14, drinking, hanging, partying, and just really doing whatever I felt like doing. So by the age of about 20, I had already broken all 10 commandments. I am RaShonda Jamerson. I am currently a marriage ministry leader with my husband at our church. We've been doing that for a little over 8 years. 3 kids. We've been married 21 years. Outside of that, I'm a school counselor. I am a published author of the book Miraculous Testimonies, and I public speak in different churches, mostly on women, marriage, and teen girls. So I'm here today to share my testimony with you. It all started, of course, long before I was born, but I was born into a household with a single mom who was married to my brother's father. My father had his own family. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of dysfunction, a lot of things where I just felt unseen, neglected, abandoned, abused. So then fast forward to around 14 where the madness of my life began. The manifestation of the madness began. At 14, I started drinking, having sex, partying, having all-night parties at my house, just running the streets, doing my thing. Did that for several years. There's a point where the Lord, I know now it was Him, would send my father to come and get me and take me to His house in Troy. So I grew up in Oak Park, and so that's where I spent most of my childhood. But then I would go to Troy with my dad, and then I would come back with my mom and go back to Troy with my dad. So it was a little bit of bouncing around. We didn't grow up in the church. My dad grew up Catholic, so we would go to church like Easter, Christmas Eve, that kind of thing. My mom considered herself a Christian and would go to church, but not really on a regular basis. So I didn't really know about God growing up or anything like that. He was never the foundation of any of the decisions that I made or the people around me. Yeah, so 14, drinking, hanging, partying, and just really doing whatever I felt like doing because my parents didn't really have a working relationship. I could manipulate. I could say, Mom, I'm at Dad, Dad, I'm at Mom's, and I'd go do what I wanted to do, even take a trip to Chicago. But those are the kinds of things I would do. I remember, doing things like taking my dad's car, driving down to Detroit, going to get liquor, coming back to his house, having a party. He did catch me on one of those, but otherwise it was pretty much just me. Mostly because my mom had my older brother with her husband, but when I was 12, he left for college. So then at that point, there was really nobody home with me. So then I was doing the back and forth thing between parents. So by college, I had started dating a guy in my high school, and that's when I really started taking a downturn. So it was pretty bad already, but it started getting worse because he introduced me to smoking weed and shrooms and things like that. Started doing things like, joyriding in stolen cars, a couple of arrests along the way, and a lot of things my parents probably don't know, but they will know now. So just doing my own thing. So by the age of about 20, I had already broken all 10 commandments, stealing all the time from work, whether it was like food or alcohol or money. Usually when I tell people I broke all 10 commandments, they want to know who I killed and who I cheated on, right? So I'm not emotionally ready to talk about the first part, but I have not cheated on my husband, but I did participate in adultery prior to salvation. And so again, just living my life, thinking I'm doing good, thinking I'm, a good girl, nothing wrong. And then a day comes where I start to feel this prompting that it's time to go to church. And I'm like, well, I don't know anybody that goes to church, and I'm not walking into a church by myself, so I guess I'm not going. So that went on for about a year or two. And then one day a guy that I was kind of dating was like, hey, I'm gonna go to this church and then I'll pick you up and take you to lunch. So I agreed, we hung up, and then I called him back and said, wait, take me to church with you. So we went to church, and when I got there, it was like, oh, this is what I needed, because it was finally a time where I felt safe. Now, just to go back a little bit to talk about safety, the guy I was dating in high school, he didn't finish high school. He ended up, when I left for college, he ended up moving with me. The one thing I did know to do, the only thing that was stable in my life was education. So I knew do my schoolwork well. So as far as my schoolwork and my teachers, they never knew me to be a person that was like wild or trouble or anything like that, because I knew, hold on to this is the only thing that's really stable. So because of that, I was able to go off to a really good college, and the guy that I was dating was a year younger, so he just followed me. He never actually finished. And so we got into those things of, like I said, all the other things earlier. And even at one point moving in together. And so we had been dating maybe 3 years at that point. So we said, well, let's just, move in together, because he started telling me that people around us started talking badly about us. I never knew it. I never saw it. I never heard it. But he kept telling me, like, this person that you grew up with since you were a child, I was living with her at the time. And he was like, yeah, I heard her talking about you out on the balcony. So I'm like, man, that's messed up. And the guy he was living with were friends from high school. And he's like, yeah, and he's talking about me too. And so I'm like, man, who can you trust, right? So the more we talked about it, the more we decided it was better that we lived with each other, because we knew that we were not talking badly about each other. So everything was fine until one day we were in a restaurant and he said something along the lines of, they're listening to us. And that got my attention. I'm like, who's listening to us? At which point he said, there's some people in the parking lot that are listening to us. Now we were sitting inside the restaurant all the way in the back. And so at that point, as a counseling student, I'm like, well, this is interesting. Let's see where this goes. Not like run for your life. This is not a good situation, which is probably what I should have done, but I didn't. So I stayed and I just kind of observed him for a little while, only to find out that he was actually hallucinating. He had actually started hearing voices because he had developed schizophrenia. I didn't know everything about it, but as a counseling student, I was especially intrigued. No flags saying run, get out of there. It was more of like, wow, this is an up close and personal experience with someone who went from no symptoms to symptoms. And so I stayed. When he was taking his medication, he was fine, but I could always tell when he wasn't taking it, because there was a downturn in his hygiene, a downturn in his behavior. He'd start hearing voices. And the point came where he said, I can't make the voices stop, so I think I'm gonna just jump off the balcony. It's the only way to make them stop. So at that point I was like, okay, this has gone far enough. Got him checked into an inpatient where he stayed for a week, which should have been another sign, but I felt like I could help him. So he came back after a week, again on his medication, but I noticed that our arguments started to escalate, and it would get more and more angry, and it started to become shoving and grabbing, slight wrestling, but I was stronger, I felt, than him. He was small framed, so I thought, whatever, I can take him. The day came where we were sitting in a drive-through, and I don't even know what the argument was about. We were sitting in front of the window. I was trying to place an order, and he just reached over and he punched me right in the eye. And I remember seeing a light, like, this is not good. He just hit you in the face in a parking, like in front of people, like, this is not good. And my only response was to just grab him by the hair and pull him back as hard as I could, which ended up pulling a braid out of his head. And then it was a whole fight in the car, in the parking lot, at the restaurant. So at that point it was like, okay, this has gone far enough. I can't do this. The other thing that I noticed, I'm typically a happy-go-lucky type of person, but after dating him for a little while, I noticed I started feeling like just kind of balling up, sitting in corners, crying, just not wanting to do things. So I didn't really know everything. I knew, again, as a counseling student, that those were not good signs. But it wasn't until I just decided that was it, I'm totally done. But I didn't know what to do, because I was in a situation where he was paying the other half of the rent. So if I put him out, that meant I had to pay the full rent, which I didn't have the money for. So I was kind of like living with him out of convenience of being able to pay the rent. Well, I ended up calling my dad, who never wanted me to date the guy in the first place and was really kind of frustrated with me for dating him. And we made the agreement. I said, Dad, I'll put him out if you help me pay the rent until the lease is done, and then I'll find somewhere to live. So my dad agreed. I put him out, and sure enough, when the lease was up, I went and lived with a friend that I met at work. And so we had lived together. We did our parties. We drank our 40s. We watched Monday Night Football. We did all the things. We were having a good time. And so now we're at the point where the Lord is saying it's time. Well, I didn't know it was the Lord at the time, but it was feeling like it's time to go to church. So after this guy takes me to church this first week, and I'm like, okay, this was the safety I've been waiting for. This is the security I've been looking for. I want more of this. So the next week I called him and said, hey, let's go to church. And he's like, I'm not going this week. He lived kind of far away. So I was like, well, where is it? I'm going. And so I went the second week. And so I was going to go the third week, and it was a Saturday night. It was July 6th, 2002. And I was home alone. My roommate had gone out. And I felt like what I now know to be the Holy Spirit is when you go to church tomorrow and they make that altar call, you're going to the front. My response, instead of like, yeah, okay, was, well, my birthday is next Saturday, next Friday. I have a party scheduled. So let's just have this party next Friday, and then that Sunday after, I will take that walk and I will do what I'm supposed to do for whatever it is you want me to do. And this wasn't like a verbal back and forth. It was just more of an internal feeling of, like, you know what you're supposed to do, but you're resisting. That's kind of how it was. It was like this feeling of like, oh, you need to take that walk tomorrow. But the resistance was like, but I got this party, and I'm a party girl. I love having fun. I just want to do this one more party, and then I'll give you my life. And I could feel that I was not going to win that back and forth against what I thought was my conscience. And so, in classic RaShonda form, I said, okay, I'll take the walk tomorrow. But tonight, I'm gonna have one more drink. So I went to the kitchen, got a beer, opened it, put it on the table, and just sat there and looked at it. And literally, there was nothing in me. There was nothing I could do to grab it and take a drink. I was staring at it. I wanted it, but I could not drink it. And I remember going, fine, I will take the walk tomorrow. I will do what it is you want me to do. Now that's not a classic salvation story, because of course as soon as the pastor made the altar call, here I go bolting down the aisle up to the front like this is me. I already know it's me. I already know I'm supposed to be here. So have been living according to the Lord's instructions and guidance ever since. So I oftentimes will tell people, yes, I broke all 10 commandments, but it is by those same 10 commandments that I now live a life of freedom and safety, security, and blessing. Because the life I was living on my own, the decisions I made all the way up to the point of salvation, does not equal the life that I'm living now. Nothing I did then says I should have been married for 21 years. Nothing I did then said I should have 3 kids that are healthy and fine. It's nothing that I'm doing now that says I should even be a leader of a marriage ministry or an author of a book. There was nothing I was doing to lead to this life. So the only reason I have this life of blessing now is because of the things that the Lord did for me at that point of salvation.
Are there things that the Lord has brought you through as a mom, as a wife, that you could share?
So the things that the Lord has brought me through as a wife, I'll start there, because again, I had no real foundation of what marriage really was. Nobody around me was married, and those who were, it wasn't really a good marriage. And then I married this man who's had this set of parents that were pastor and had been married his whole life, So I really had no clue what it meant to be a wife. It was very frustrating. And so there were many, many times where I wanted to give up and leave the marriage. There was many times where I felt under-equipped and I felt like my husband deserved better than me, so I wanted to leave the marriage. There was even this point, and it's that 7-year itch, I didn't want to believe it was real, but at least it was for us, where we had this huge blowout. And for the first time I had vocalized, we were out of town with his family, and I was like, when we get back to Michigan, you can keep going north to Flint with your mother. But I didn't know at that same time he was thinking, when we get back to Michigan, I'm gonna keep heading north to Flint with my mother. And so one of the things that I learned to do, because I don't know anything about marriage and I knew very little about being saved, the only thing I would ever know to do, again, just like with school, I knew to hold on to the consistent and to the constant. And so I knew to go to God, because he was the consistent and he was the constant. So whenever I would get in a situation where I felt overwhelmed, where I felt like I didn't know what to do according to my marriage, I would go and I would listen to a worship song. And it's called I Will Worship Thee. And it was, I would just listen to it on repeat. And I'm like, Lord, pretty much, I don't know what to do. I don't know any of this. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to satisfy this man. I don't know what a wife is supposed to do. I just need to follow you and let you tell me what to do. That's when I learned my life scripture of seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added. Because what happened is, when I don't know what to do, I just worship him in song, and I pour out my heart, and I spend time in the word, and I'm like, I just need you to guide me. And so even that night that I had decided I was leaving my husband, and I was going to tell him to leave, I sat in the car and I listened to that song over and over. And then hubby came down and was like, listen, we got to get this together. And that night we talked through everything, and we had determined we are never getting back to this place again. And so every time since then where I feel flustered or overwhelmed or I don't know, you will find me singing, listening to some music somewhere by myself, sitting alone, praying, reading my word. Even if it's got nothing to do with what we're going through, the Lord has a real good way of dropping nuggets in about things that, it's like I'm reading about, Gideon turning over the fleece, and then the Lord's like, boom, this is what you need to do about your marriage. It doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it is how he reveals things while we're reading his word. And so every time I feel like I'm in a place where I don't know what to do when it comes to marriage, or this isn't going to work, or the scary time where a couple years ago we just started hearing about all the marriages around us that weren't working, that were starting to divorce, and we were like, this cannot be us. And so the more I learned to surrender to God, the more he told me to just follow my husband, which the independent woman side of me was like, no. But he was like, well, if you want to be married, doesn't it make sense to learn from the one you're married to what he needs? And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So instead of doing what I thought was right, or instead of doing what other people were doing or what people told me was right, I would go to my husband like, what do you want? And then he would tell me what he wanted from me as a wife. And even though sometimes I'd do it through gritted teeth or folded hands, I would do it because I want to be married to him. So it only made sense for me to follow his lead. So I actually learned that it was great that I walked in not knowing anything about marriage, because it's almost like being a virgin, and so you get to learn your husband as opposed to bringing all this other knowledge in and having to unlearn it to learn it for your husband. And so I just started to kind of follow him. What does he like? What pleases him? What makes him happy? And the more I did that, the more I saw him do that in response to me, where he would then want to know, what makes you happy? So it just started to work out that way. So as a wife, I know it's a long answer, but as a wife, that is what God has done for me. As a mother, that's a whole nother story. But long story short, I had my first son, and it was like within 2 months of trying. So it was like nothing. Well, then the second time we tried, after my son was about a year and a half, we lost the baby. Then we decided to try again, and we lost that baby too. So I was like, I don't know, like maybe at this point we adopt. Like, I don't know what else to do. I love this man, and I can't give him any children. I was grateful that I could give him a son and name him after him, but couldn't do anything else after that. And so my best friend, big sister, told me, you need to go get looked at or whatever, because she had happened to run into some person who had miscarried a few babies and had a medical condition. So she said, just go get tested. And sure enough, it turned out that I have a blood disorder called factor V Leiden, and it overclots. So it was treating the pregnancies like injuries, and it was overclotting, and it was cutting off anything to the baby. So the doctor said, well, if you ever get pregnant again, you have to do blood thinners. That's 2 shots a day in your stomach every day. And I went, oh, okay, because I'm pregnant. So I was pregnant a third time. And so he said, well, let's get on these shots. So twice a day, every day, I was taking shots to the belly to keep this baby alive. And then it was at the, I don't know, 4 or 5 month mark where they go in and they want to see the gender and things like that. They go in and they say it's a girl, but we have a problem. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what? Well, my blood was too thin, so I had developed a blood sac inside the placenta. So they were like, you have to stop the blood thinners now. And so now I was like, okay, well, you just told me I had to be on them to save her life. Now you're telling me to get off of them now. And so I just remember going through the like, what do I do? Do I do it? Do I not? Do I do it? Do I not? And I just remember being like, well, Lord, you know, you allowed my big sister Bestie to hear this information. You allowed her to tell me. We happen to find out. Like, all of this has been according to your plan. So I'm going to stop, and then we'll just, what will be, will be. And lo and behold, was born my beautiful baby girl. And she's amazing. So no disorders or anything like that. Like, she's perfectly fine. But my husband had grown up then with his parents being foster parents. So instead, like, in addition to they're Christians, they've been married his whole life, they were also foster parents. I was like, oh great, will we ever live up to this? But so he wanted to foster. And so I was like, I don't really know what this is. I don't really know what it's about, but I've always wanted a big family because I pretty much grew up by myself. So sure, let's do it. So we go through this whole process. About 3 days after we were approved for our foster care license, they called us and said, we got a little boy for you. And it was July 4th. It was a holiday. And so they said, well, we'll bring him by tomorrow. Something happened. They couldn't bring him. Well, then they ended up bringing him on July 6th, which July 6, 2017, July 6, 2002 was the day I got saved. And so in walks this little boy, 3 years old, cute as can be. And so we said, okay, we'll foster, we'll do this. Well, he had been through a lot. He was wild, he was out of control. He was, he knew more about superheroes than letters at the age of 3. But it was fine. It was like, okay, we're just gonna foster and, he'll go home. And about 3 months in, they said his parents have both lost their rights. Would you like to adopt? I was like, really? The first foster? And we're gonna adopt, huh? And it was like, yes, because we knew we could be a good solid home for him. And we didn't know if we said no, where he would go or what would happen with him. So we agreed. And so we have 3, I was about to say little ones, but they're big now. We've got 3 big ones at home, and it has been a whirlwind. It's been a journey, especially with our third. I mean, he's been through a lot, and so about as much as he's been through is about what we went through with him. But the Lord has been gracious and have given us the grace and the patience to work through things with him. He's in a much better place than he's ever been, and so we're grateful for that. So that's how the Lord brings us through. He let me go through things to pull on him and to lean on him, and with all 3 kids. I mean, my oldest was fine. He's a boy though, so he did boy things. My daughter's amazing. She's a girl. But she's me, so she's got her own set of issues in a different way. And then my youngest. So all 3 though, the Lord, I remember when I first got saved and I didn't know anything about prophecy or anything like that. And when a woman told me, she said, you're gonna have a wonderful husband and beautiful children. And so I wrote that down, and that was back in 2002. And I look back now and I'm like, the Lord was right. He was right. I've got a wonderful husband and I've got 3 very, very beautiful children. Not only do I think that, but they get compliments everywhere they go. We get compliments about them everywhere they go. They really are great kids. But that's all God, not me.
That is awesome. You mentioned that you are a counselor. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that when you are speaking with kids that you bring in like your past before Jesus, and then also now that you know Jesus, are you able to infuse that as well in your counseling? Absolutely. So not only am I an LPC, so a licensed professional counselor, but I'm also a school counselor. The majority of my work has been in school counseling in high schools. I've done some professional counseling, but I feel like I'm a better fit in the school setting. And so I worked in one school district that was public for a very long time. And absolutely, my childhood experiences has helped. A lot of times what I tell students, because they've come in, especially the district I was in, they had, there was a variety of households and experiences, and
some of the worst stories I could ever hear came from some of my students, and I would say to them, I didn't go through that, but I went through something similar, or I went through that. And in the end, I give them the same kind of tagline. If I can go through it and turn out to be a almost perfectly normal, healthy adult, so can you. So it was a way to say, let me be your living proof that you can get to the other side of this. Let me be your example that there is another side and you can work through it. But now I didn't have me, you have me. So now we can walk through this together. Because I was in a public school, I couldn't pray with them, but I would pray in my head as they were talking. And I could share some biblical, principles to help them along the way. But the Lord moved me 3 years ago to a Christian school, which is even better because now I can say to them, let's pray. And so I can share with them some things, the same kind of things. I tell them everything that I've experienced. I tell my kids what I experienced, because it's better for you to know and to see what God has done rather than you not know and you just think, like my kids thought, oh, well, you've always been this way because this is the only way they've known me. And so my high school students are the same, but I can say to them, this is what I did. These were my experiences, but look at what God did. Of course, we tell them, that doesn't mean if you do it, God will bring you through the same way. It's not worth it, let me tell you. But what I do know is if you do experience these things, God can bring you through to the other side.
That's great. Finish this sentence for me. If it had not been for Jesus.
If it had not been for Jesus, I would still be living according to my own way. And I have no idea where that would have taken me. I mean, you imagine a person who is okay with breaking all 10 commandments and still thinking they're a good person. Who knows where I would be? But it is because of Jesus that I am where I am. One of the things that I like to go around and talk to people about is the names of God. And I'll say, we know names of God, Rapha, Jireh, Nisi. We know those things, but those names are not personal for us. Those names are things we've read about or things we know about him. You'll know his name is personal when you say the name and then you have to tell the story. So oftentimes I will ask people, what is your name for God? My name for him is the one who opens doors I didn't know existed. And the reason for that is because, and I could tell you a whole bunch of stories, but it's just a lot of things I walked through life not really knowing what I was doing. And even going into grad school, I thought I wanted to go into public relations, but I didn't have enough credits. I ended up picking school counseling. I don't really even know why I picked it. But now that I'm on this side, I'm like, I'm home in the summers with my kids. I'm home on vacations. There's a lot of benefits to being a school counselor that is beneficial for me personally. I don't think I could have ever worked year round. It's just not in me to do it. But God opened that door. I didn't know that existed. And there are several other stories like that. And so I usually will ask people this same kind of question. If you had to give him a name based on who he is and what he's done for you personally, what name would you give him? And it doesn't have to be one word. It could be a phrase. It could be multiple words. But you'll know if it's impactful and powerful if you feel like telling your testimony after that. So if it wasn't for Jesus, I'd have a whole lot of closed doors and I could not be where I am today.
Awesome. The final thing is, what would you say to someone who is listening to your testimony right now and they can identify with any part of the story that you told? What would you say to them?
I would tell them, trust the Lord. For this reason, one of the things the Lord said to me is, I made your path and then you were born. And then I put you on the path I made for you. But after you were born, you wanted to make your own path and you wanted me to follow that. But I can't follow that because I made my path for you first. So you can try to take your path, and every time I don't agree or I don't get in line, you feel disappointed. Or you can understand that I made my path first and then I put you on the path. And so everything that happens on that path, when it happens, you feel blessed. Now, that path is certainly not perfect. It says God rains on the just and the unjust, and I don't know about you, but I hate getting wet in the rain. So it's not like everything is always perfect. But at least I know if it's happening, it's because he planned it before I even existed. Nobody's going to choose the path of life that they're on. If you would have asked me at the beginning, do you want to go through the things you've gone through? Oh, no. Would you? Would you choose your path in advance? No. Nobody would choose their path in advance. And the Lord knows that. That's why he had to make it and then just put us on it, right? It's like, would you want this path with alligators, with fire, with spikes? No, no, and no. Well, you got to do something because I got to display my glory. So I'm just going to put you on this path and I'm going to be with you and I'm going to show you how to get through it and still give me glory. And that's what God does. So if you identified with anything, I would say just keep seeking God's plan. How do you do that? Because I know that sounds like a very Christian thing to say, but it really is just reading the Bible anywhere, anything. Not like there's a right place to start, there's a wrong place to start. It's all his word. Read it. It's like a journal, right? And so I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like, I want to read people's journal. Not all the time because I don't want to know. But he's saying, read my journal, learn me, listen to my voice, understand how I operate. Everything's written. So wherever you start in the Bible is fine. Just read it. I would also say that means just praying, just talking to him, and then just listening, sitting quietly and acting on the little bit of things you think he's prompting you to do. I'd say listen, pray, read, sing songs, or just play the songs, or just play the audio Bible. It's really just to get to know him. You have to spend time with the things that he's given us so that we can get to know him. No different than if a person wanted to get to know you. They would spend time in your home. They would talk to you. They would read some of your notes that you maybe put in a book, or, you know, like if you're reading and you kind of script over to the side. They would talk to other people who know you. If somebody really wanted to know you, that's how they would get to know you. And that's the same thing you do for God. And the more you do that, what I found is the less I focus on, you know, what I should do or what I can or cannot control. And I just spend time. If you really want to know, Job chapters 38 through 41 are my favorite because it's the only time where God breaks down who he is and what he's capable of. So if you really want to know him, or if you want to walk through whatever you're walking through, if you want to rejoice in a way that is so awesome, read about who our Father is. Read about the one that says he created the heavens and the earth. He created the seas. He's walked the recesses of the deep. He knows when the mountain goat gives birth. He can control the Leviathan and the wild donkey. Like, this is the God we serve. He knows where the hail is stored. He knows how to blow the wind from the east or the west or bring constellations forward in the right season. That's who we serve. And the more you focus on who we serve, the more insight, wisdom, and ability you have to see what it is you're supposed to do here on this earth.
That is beautiful. This really is the final thing. If you feel led to pray, you can take this moment to do that. If you don't, that's fine as well, but I'll give you a moment to decide which one you want.
Instead of praying, can I just spend a little bit of time, a little more time, just painting the picture for who God is?
Yes, yes.
Because when we say to people, you are made in his image, well, if I don't know him, what difference does that make? If we say, oh, depend on him, lean on him, but we don't have any proof of who he is or what he's done, what difference does it make? So again, I just would like to let you know who God is. For me, again, he's the one who opens doors that I didn't know existed. Who is he to you? Where has he been? I had this course at our church called Inner Healings, which I originally, because I didn't grow up in the church, thought it was just a bunch of church mumbo jumbo. Then I got in it and realized how much healing I needed. But one of the questions they asked me in one of the worst times of my life that I didn't share because I'm not really emotionally ready to do that yet, but they asked me in that moment, where was Jesus? And I'm like, Jesus? In the worst moment of my life? I never even thought he was there. But as I sat quietly and I prayed in my heart, Lord, where were you in that moment? He showed me I was on his back, holding him back, begging him not to do what he did. And I broke down because I realized that even though he gives us free will and we get to decide if we listen to him or not, he was there. He was there. This is the God who knows all, who sees all. He whispers to us in our ear. He visits us in our dreams. He controls the universe. He determines when the sun comes up and when it goes down. He loves us enough to show us who he is by bringing us the animals, bringing us the land, the seasons. Please, if you get a chance, just even if you don't want to read Job 38, 39, 40, and 41, just do an audio and just listen to the magnificence of the God we serve. The one who says, which I had never thought about, I chased down the prey for the lioness. In my mind, the lioness always got her own food. But no, he made sure that she was able to get there. He carved the path for where the water goes when it falls on the earth. He's down to those details, the things that I don't even think are important. And he's like, if that little bit is important to me, how much greater are you? He loves you. And he doesn't care what you've done up to this point. This is, if you needed anything, this is your opportunity to say to him, Lord, I'm yours. I don't know what it means. Help me understand. I want to grow deeper. Whatever it is, take this opportunity to call on his name and watch him work.